During the Vietnam War, behind the fog of conflict and official reports, a dark story was buried. A story of brutal atrocities committed by a U.S. military unit and the shocking lengths taken to cover it all up. Known as Tiger Force, this elite group was supposed to be the best of the best, but instead, they left a trail of devastation that included civilian massacres, torture, and unimaginable acts of violence. For decades, the truth was hidden, shielded by silence and bureaucracy. But what really happened in the jungles of Vietnam? How far did military leaders go to ensure that the horrors committed by Tiger Force would never see the light of day? In this video, we will uncover the chilling story of Tiger Force, delve into the gruesome details of their actions, and reveal the cover-up that kept their crimes in the shadows for so long. So stay with us because you don't want to miss this. The formation of Tiger Force. Although the Vietnam War is remembered as a contentious struggle, there is a darker side to it, one of covert crimes and willful concealment. The tale of Tiger Force, a top-tier American military organization entrusted with invading enemy territory, is one of the most terrifying parts of the story. Tiger Force was created in 1965 as part of the 101st Airborne Division, designed to operate as an elite reconnaissance unit deep behind enemy lines. Its mission was clear: infiltrate the dense jungles of Vietnam, track Viet Cong movements, sabotage supply routes, and eliminate high-value targets. Comprised of only 45 soldiers at a time, each hand-picked for their physical toughness and combat skills, the unit was expected to outmaneuver and outfight even the most experienced guerrilla fighters. From the start, Tiger Force operated like a rogue shadow, cut off from the larger military machine and unleashed into the unforgiving jungles of Vietnam. Designed for flexibility and rapid action, their autonomy was meant to be their strength, but it became their undoing. Facing relentless enemy ambushes, hidden traps, and the psychological weight of isolation, the unit's mission to out-guerrilla the guerrillas quickly took a dark and brutal turn. Under the guise of eliminating the enemy, Tiger Force unleashed a wave of violence that left destruction in its wake, targeting not only enemies but also anyone who might be suspected of aiding them. As the pressures of combat increased, the lines between strategy and savagery started to blur, and orders to dismantle the Viet Cong network turned into something far more sinister. Villagers, including farmers, women, and even children, found themselves in the crosshairs, victims of a unit that had given up restraint for survival. By 1967, Tiger Force had built a fearsome reputation as a lethal unit, but beneath that image lay the grim truth. Their success in battle was overshadowed by the atrocities they committed, hidden from public view for decades. What should have been a story of elite soldiers excelling under pressure became a chilling example of what happens when the horrors of war strip away humanity, leaving chaos and destruction in their place. Tiger Force, once a symbol of military prowess, became a harrowing reminder of the devastating toll of unchecked power and the psychological scars of combat. Atrocities in Song Vi Valley. One of the saddest periods of the Vietnam War was the crimes carried out by Tiger Force in Song Vi Valley in 1967. Their stated mission was relocating civilians to secure areas and driving out Viet Cong fighters from the valley. But in actuality, the operation unleashed a torrent of violence that left destruction in its wake and made it difficult to distinguish between soldiers and civilians. Anyone who remained following evacuation orders was deemed an enemy because the region had been declared a free-fire zone. But instead of making combat judgments easier, this doctrine served as an excuse for indiscriminate killing. Because they felt that staying neutral would keep them out of trouble, those with strong cultural links to their region frequently refused to leave. But neutrality offered no protection. For Tiger Force, the policy effectively turned every farmer, elder, or child in the valley into a target. Witness accounts describe horrific incidents. Farmers working in rice paddies were gunned down without warning. In one reported case, soldiers forced villagers out of hiding and executed them in cold blood. A boy leading two blind men was accused of spying, and all three were killed. These killings were not acts of desperation or self-defense. They were deliberate. In many cases, the soldiers justified the deaths with planted weapons or fabricated claims of Viet Cong ties. Personal accounts from soldiers shed light on the chaotic nature of the operation. Some expressed horror at the violence, while others, emboldened by the lack of accountability, embraced the brutality. The Free Fire Zone theory only exacerbated the catastrophe by obfuscating the moral and legal distinctions between war crimes and military operations. Fire devastated entire communities, and the people who lived there were either killed or confined to camps. Escalation of violence under Lieutenant Hawkins. Under Lieutenant James Hawkins, Tiger Force's descent into darkness became a chilling freefall. Taking command in mid-1967, Hawkins brought with him a volatile mix of reckless aggression and blatant disregard for human life. His leadership didn't just condone brutality, it actively encouraged it. With his open disdain for the Vietnamese people and his infamous "shoot anything that moves" mantra, Hawkins transformed the unit into a machine of terror, where violence became the norm and mercy was abandoned. Hawkins viewed the civilians in the so-called free fire zones not as innocents but as potential threats. Under this twisted logic, even the most vulnerable were seen as enemies. One horrifying example still haunts those who witnessed it. Hawkins personally executed a captured villager in cold blood, shooting the man point blank as his soldiers looked on in shock. It wasn't just an act of cruelty, it was a message. Under Hawkins, brutality wasn't just accepted, it was expected. The unit spiraled into a grim routine of killing prisoners and targeting civilians without justification. Women, children, and the elderly, no one was spared. Hawkins' influence didn't stop with direct orders. It seeped into the psyche of the entire unit. Soldiers who might have hesitated found themselves emboldened by his leadership. Some began collecting grisly trophies like ears and scalps, turning murder into sport. Others planted weapons on the dead to fabricate excuses for their actions. Dissent was dismissed as weakness, leaving no room for anyone to question the horrors unfolding around them. Under Hawkins' command, Tiger Force became a symbol of unchecked savagery. His leadership not only devastated Vietnamese civilians, but also shattered the moral compass of his own men. What should have been a mission to infiltrate enemy territory turned into a reign of terror, leaving behind a legacy of trauma and shame that would stain the U.S. military's history and haunt the soldiers involved for years to come. Cover-up attempts by military leadership. Now, as soon as soldiers and onlookers started to denounce the unit's savage acts, rumors of horror began to circulate. One of the first conscience-raising voices was Lieutenant Donald Wood, who documented the ruthless murders and outright executions of civilians. Wood's concerns were dismissed as though they had never been raised, and instead of being celebrated as a whistleblower, he was discreetly transferred to a different unit. Others who dared to speak up faced similar roadblocks. Soldiers who objected to the carnage feared retaliation, not just from their bloodthirsty peers, but from commanding officers who were more invested in preserving Tiger Force's image as an elite fighting machine than in addressing war crimes. The unofficial message was loud and clear: keep quiet or pay the price. Careers hung in the balance, and many chose silence over risking their future or safety. Investigations were little more than bureaucratic slow walking when they did start. A military investigator discovered a graphic tapestry of torture, executions, and mutilations after meticulously gathering incriminating testimony from both soldiers and people. However, superiors swiftly stepped in, preventing him from looking into authority and resources. He was quickly moved despite the fact that his discoveries were painstakingly documented and hidden deep in the military's files. When journalists sensed a story, they were met with stone barriers. Those with first-hand stories faced threats to their integrity and smear efforts, and requests for access were turned down. Despite growing evidence that presented a far more sinister and systemic picture, the military's public relations apparatus pushed tirelessly to deny the crimes as the product of a few rogue individuals. The cover-up worked for years. As long as the reality was kept a secret, Tiger Force's reputation held firm. Military leadership not only allowed the offenders to go free, but also caused the victims to suffer more severe injuries and damaged the morale of the armed services by prioritizing image preservation over pursuing justice. Revelations and public exposure. Decades after the Vietnam War, the horrors of Tiger Force finally came to light, thanks to the relentless efforts of investigative journalists and the preservation of key evidence. In December 2002, journalists Michael Salla and Mitch Weiss received a trove of documents from the estate of Henry Tufts, a former U.S. Army commander. Tufts had safeguarded these materials, knowing they contained evidence of one of the most chilling cover-ups in military history. His foresight would prove instrumental in exposing the truth. The documents outlined an extensive investigation into Tiger Force's actions, initiated during the war but deliberately buried to protect the U.S. military's reputation. Salla and Weiss, with support from their newsroom, began reconstructing the events by cross-referencing official records, testimonies, and survivor accounts. Their work revealed a systematic campaign of murder, mutilation, and terror that had been ignored by leadership and hidden from public view. The journalists traveled to Vietnam to gather first-hand accounts from survivors. In one haunting interview, the son of a farmer murdered by Tiger Force described the day his father and others were shot while collecting rice. His testimony aligned with the evidence from the U.S. records, reinforcing the credibility of the claims. These accounts were devastating, detailing how families were torn apart by unprovoked violence, their villages destroyed in the name of counterinsurgency. According to former Tiger Force soldiers interviewed, some openly admitted their involvement in the incident, while others rejected the charges. The stories painted a grim picture of a force operating without moral or legal constraints. The story of Tiger Force isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a call to action. Accountability isn't optional. It's the backbone of integrity, especially in institutions wielding the power of life and death. The legacy of Tiger Force shows us that the cost of silence is far greater than the cost of truth. So, what do you think about the legacy of Tiger Force and the decades-long effort to keep it hidden? And does this story expose deeper flaws in how we handle accountability during war? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from history. Stay curious, stay questioning, and we'll see you next time.